stories, and lessons 7 days a week from across the games industry, helping you make the best game you can. Stay tuned for today's episode. Good morning, Overload Nation. Welcome to another episode of the Daily Dev Talk, talking to game developers from across the world to bring you experiences, stories, and lessons 7 days a week. Today, I'm joined with Forest San Filippo from Flippfly, to talk about his first game, Race the Sun. Forest, talk about yourself first, please, and how you got into the games industry.
Sure. So I had an unusual path to the games industry. I was not into games at all. I didn't go to school for it. My brother, however, knew that he wanted to be a game developer from the time he was a kid, and he got into the industry. Got hired by a studio here in Wisconsin right out of college, and which in turn was acquired by Activision. And so he ended up working on very well known titles. And I went the other route. I was into graphic design, web design. I just did it as a freelancer, kind of had that entrepreneurial spirit, and so I did that for years. And uh, he got to a point where he wanted to make his own thing, and I was sick of making other people's artwork and doing their vision, and so we got together, and he said, "Hey, why don't we try this? Why don't we give it a go?" And we started by making little apps on the side, while we were still maintaining our day jobs, and we made a little children's app that kind of was a proof, I guess, a proof of concept for us. It proved that we could make something from end to end, and that it could be quality, and it was well received, well reviewed. Apple even featured it in a few of their little slots in the storefront. We didn't really make much money on it, but it gave us the confidence to say that we could do it. And so from there we jumped in, we quit our jobs, went full time, and started burning up savings. So.
Okay, that is a cool way. Unusual, a tiny bit. Like the first, say, third or something, but the rest of it is like, that's cool. Entrepreneurial. You got out of the job paradigm. You didn't want to do 9 to 5. Jobs don't have futures. People do. You wanted to make your own game, have no restrictions, own freedom. That is amazing, and I well respect that because you had that foresight, or at least that desire, to get out of a 9 to 5 and not stuck building someone else's dream. When you can make your own games, make your own business, make your own rules, be your own boss properly, fully, and to the fullest extent. That is amazing. I don't see how exactly unusual graphic design. Nah, that's pretty cool, isn't it? That got you into modeling as a resident artist.
Yeah, yeah. I did a lot of 2D work before we got into Flippfly, which is funny because then we everything we've done has been 3D, everything we've released at least. And so
Mm.
it was a switch there. Kind of had to learn a lot, but the concepts, colors, layout, contrast, space. It's all the same thing.
Oh
So.
yeah, composition, Fibonacci spiral, rules of three, etc. Oh, it's all there, no doubt. It's
Mhm.
all there because the amazing thing is, as regards to psychology, is that humans are the same.
Mhm.
Most like schools of art or science or such, they overlap into other areas. So yeah, I mean, like
Yep.
you can get psychology straight into games. It's amazing.
Yep.
So tell me about your studio, Flippfly. How many people is it? What's the structure and such like that?
Sure. So the core studio is still just two people. We have my brother and I, and then we decided, rather than trying to build a become an employer, we would kind of support other indies and other entrepreneurs. And so we worked with exclusively with contractors to this point, where we bring somebody in and do a contract with them to, for instance, the game started on PC, and we brought it to PlayStation, and we brought in a contractor to help do the port over to PlayStation. And so we work directly with them, and it's an opportunity for us to do things that we couldn't do on our own because we're only two people, and it also hopefully can support talented people to go off and make their own projects. They can make a living without having to jump into that studio environment. So.
Okay. When you say you don't hire the employees, was that also a reason why you don't hire employees because of the US tax laws and laws as regards to employees, employers, like health benefits, dental plan, etc. And and there's loads of others. Is
Yeah,
that reason why,
it's
or had
it's
a massive
yeah,
impact?
it's more of a complexity issue than it is a financial
Yeah,
issue. Contractors, generally get paid higher rates, but then they have to take care of all those things on their own.
right.
So for us, if we were to employ someone, we would probably it'd be the same amount of money going out the door. It would just be a lot more paperwork on
Yeah.
our end.
Mhm.
That was part of it as well. It's like, why spend our time filling out paperwork when we can support these these other talented people who want to have that freedom, and want to be able to make their own schedules and work at 1 in the morning if they want to. And so it works out really well. It's becoming a pretty common thing in games, where you keep your studio small, you bring on contractors per project, and some of the, it's interesting once you start looking at some of the more successful games, you start seeing some of the same names in the credits. These folks that have kind of jumped around to different small studios and lended their talents and helped to make a great game. So
Mm.
something we want to be a part of. It works really well, and it's a fun relationship then.
And
So
also a little side note as well. You might have realised this or stumbled across it, but what you're also doing by hiring contractors is you might have heard of the invisible hand principle.
hmm. I don't think so. I'm not familiar with that.
Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, 1776. He talks about
Okay.
by businesses or entrepreneurs, yeah, by pursuing their own interests first. In this case, in your case at least, making a game,
Hmm.
you are benefiting society, or in this case, other contractors, so other potential employees,
Hmm.
by pursuing your own interests, by not hiring them, and being quote unquote selfish, by not wanting to do the admin, not wanting to fill out the paperwork, you're enriching these contractors. You could argue ever more so because you're not wasting time and you're just getting someone per project. They're getting the experience
Hmm.
and the money, the pay, and you're getting a game made. And
Right.
then and then that's it. Work on another game or not. So rather than hiring people for the sake of hiring people, like hey, three months contract,
Right.
we have to use that workforce. We're stuck with them unless something happens that they can justify their own getting rid of firing. It just hey,
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
on this project. That's it. Goodbye. So
Yeah.
by being selfish and looking at your own interests, you're enriching other people and the idea of the game. If the designer, artist, whatever, wouldn't play the game you're working on, then consumer
Hmm.
wouldn't pay for the game you're working on,
Right.
having that
Right.
passion for it.
Yeah. The idea of kind of everyone involved, walking away with something valuable is really important
Right.
to us. We want people who spend their time here. We want them to, want it to be a great experience, and we find it, you know, really refreshing in that sense too. That would everyone we work with has their own projects. Everyone we work with is working on something that's a personal passion project or their own businesses, and so we're hoping, that by kind of giving them a bit of stability, through the contract, that we
Mm,
can help
hmm
them also realize their own dreams and bring more, great games. So.
Cool, and that's what it's all about:
Mhm.
enriching people, entertaining people. That's what it's all about. So, speaking of entertaining, tell us about Race the Sun and what you wanted the player to experience.
So we knew immediately from the prototype that we wanted the game to be about speed. We wanted to push the speed envelope faster than it had ever been pushed, and I'm not sure if we are the fastest game out there, but I feel like we're among the top tier, and that was really important to us. We wanted people to really feel that kind of adrenaline rush, of near misses and
Mm.
kind of just barely being in control of what you're doing. So that was the number one thing. We just wanted that, that boost and that speed. What's interesting, what we found is that players after they've kind of adjusted to the speed, that there's a lot of players call the game relaxing, which I never would have thought of. But we found that people kind of get into the zone, I guess, and they kind of have this zen-like experience, and so that's become pretty core to our goal for the game. After we sort of discovered that wasn't intentionally designed, but uh, we kind of embraced that and tried to build the game around that, rather than kind of like heavy thumping, techno music, and trying to make things seem really off kilter, and and we the soundtrack's a little more, a little more laid back, a little more chill, and even the environment, even though it's trying to constantly kill you, it does sort of have like a beauty to it, is what we were going for, so.
Oh yeah, it's a lot less psychedelic, noticeably psychedelic. Um, what I yeah, I noticed the music as well. What I really liked about it was the sound effects on the cubes, literally cubes, just
Yeah.
flawed, not
Yeah.
flawed, fod, just it was, and at the same time the music notes when what the triangles and those crown things
Hmm.
when you're picking up those. I kind of expected the music to kind of like go like an arpeggio or something as you
Hmm.
collected 8 of them in a row,
Hmm.
rather than the music just not random notes but quite incoherent. I was expecting that a little bit,
Mm.
but I can understand what you mean by having some players experiencing Zen and quite relaxing, because I've noticed that some of the puzzles you can just keep going straight forward, and
Yeah. Yeah.
little nudges to the left, little nudges to the right, and you've dodged a massive caterpillar.
Right.
You've
Right.
dodged this like star thing shooting things at you,
Yeah.
and
Sometimes less is more. There's one particular spot in the apocalypse. Once you unlock apocalypse, there's this one particular spot where there's all these blocks in a real narrow area, moving back and forth, and you crash over and over if trying to figure it out. And here's a tip for the game if you come to that. The secret is actually to do nothing. You just pick a path, and you'll go right through it.
wait,
Um,
through the entire level.
no, 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 just for this one section, just for
All
this,
right.
yeah, just for this one section where the blocks they seem impossible to get through, and they are if you try to move. But if you just set your course in one spot and just don't move it, they'll actually kind of go right around you, and you won't hit them. So, um,
One thing I don't understand about these kind of games is how do you program more or less infinity?
mm,
Because like most of the games like this, in theory, the player could get to level 100 or region
mm,
100 very easily, and
yeah,
you may only have enough art for like 10 levels, 20 levels, or enough code
hmm,
to flesh out 20 levels. After that, surely it's got to be procedural upon procedural upon procedural upon procedural code to
hmm,
get level 100 generally, or completely different from level 50 or 75.
yeah,
How did
yeah.
you guys do that in this case?
Yeah, so the way that we did it is rather than having like a purely randomized level, we made chunks of level. So we have this kind of grid that spawns out, and it's a set hand designed chunk. And you'll notice that that as you go in, you play the game, you say, "Oh, I've seen this before." This section looks exactly the same, and they're very short. I think it takes 2 seconds to cross one chunk of level. And then the algorithms spawn those chunks out randomly. So they're all compatible with each other. But they'll spawn out randomly, and then the level kind of locks in. That's the level for that day, for a 24-hour period. And then
Hmm.
it'll do that same thing for the level two. But we have spawning rules so that these chunks kind of have rules to them. So say this chunk with all the blocks that fall over, that will spawn between regions 2 and regions 4 or something like that, and it's a possibility. It goes into a pool of potential patterns that can spawn, and then the system will just continually spawn those out in a way that increases difficulty as you go. And once you hit a certain point, we will just keep recycling. After a certain point, you won't see anything new, but it's far enough out that I think it's probably less than 1% of our players will ever actually get to that
Hmm.
point.
Okay.
So
Wow. So you even had the levels randomized on each day, each 24-hour period.
yep. So that it actually locks in. It's basically it spawns the patterns and then locks them in. It uses a specific random seed that's based on the date, and then locks them all in. And then you kind of have an opportunity to sort of learn the patterns and get comfortable with the arrangement of things. And then then the next day it will actually uh, respawn them and lock into a different pattern. So.
Well, that is pretty cool. I was curious how people would make these auto running games, because surely after a certain point, that's everything. It's got
Hmm.
to be the procedural code somehow creates the next level. Because you can't like create 100 levels unique. You've got to do
Right.
something.
Yeah, at
So
some
you
point,
know
yeah.
exactly. I just like procedural upon procedural and changes day by day. That's pretty cool. I bet that's really I bet that's really knocked up a few players. Not knocked up, but really confused a few. Confused a
Yeah.
few.
Yeah, it looks very similar, and then you load it up the next day and you say, wait a minute, this wasn't here before. And so
Exactly.
we wanted that,
Exactly.
feel somewhat fresh. So.
hmm And about a week ago, roughly, or a week and a half or two, the game was available for free on Steam. Can you
Hmm.
tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so the game actually originally was released on Steam in 2013, late 2013, and we've done many sales. We've been a part of a couple humble bundles, and I think we've discounted it as much as 80%. And so we got to a point where we said, the game is, it sells a little bit as we go along, but really, I think that everyone who knows about the game currently and wants the game has probably purchased it. And then at the same time, we said, well, we're coming to this iOS launch, and we really want to get the word out about that because many people will discover the game. It'll be on iOS. And so actually, my brother Aaron said, "Well, what if instead of doing a big discount to promote the iOS launch, what if we just make it free?" And uh, we talked it over and we said, "Well, hey, what have we got to lose? We're going to have so many more people will find out about the game, that just never even heard about it. I mean, we're a small studio. We can't, go out and buy big banner ads on all the websites and get the word out that way. So we kind of rely on sales and things like Humble Bundle to get the word out. Uh, and so that's why that came about. We said, well, we'll make it so when you open the game right away, there'll be a little note about it being on iPhone, and we'll just hope that people uh, decide from there, to either tell their friends about it, uh, get it on iPhone, buy the DLC, something or other, or in worst case scenario, somebody gets to enjoy our game who didn't get to previously. So,
Well,
like,
that
yeah.
well, that's great because ultimately, yeah, word of mouth
Hmm.
through really, well, you could argue social currency because this person has the game that was for free,
Hmm.
and I think through Steam's reach, I think any game that comes for free on a single 24-hour period, generally speaking, you would tend to assume that everyone's got it then
Right.
on their account because it's right there, which makes me think, how did you organize that with Steam to get it for free? Because I wouldn't imagine they do things like that very often.
Yeah, no, it was just a personal thing with our, we pitched the idea to someone who works directly on the Steam store, and they worked with us, and so it was uh, probably a unique scenario. I think anyone can run their own sales on Steam. Steam would allow you to, uh, change the price of your game and do that, but
hmm
that was just something we worked out with them, and
Okay. Okay.
you know
Right.
they're.
Well, um, you were saying just then something else.
Oh yeah, no, just yeah. I
Okay.
think anyone could do something similar, but it probably wouldn't show up on the pop-up, when you first open up Steam. So,
hmm
um,
Well, it popped up on my screen when I closed the game,
mm.
so it's like that's cool. It really stood out. So, aside from the Steam freebie, how else did you go about promoting the game?
Well, early before it was released, we did a Kickstarter, which was too early. We did it too early, and we didn't get to show off. Really what the final game was going to look like. Midway through the Kickstarter, we released a new trailer that actually showed more of what the actual gameplay was going to look like, and uh, but it did succeed. We were kickstarted, but it could have been much more successful.
hmm
Um, and that was kind of a promotional effort. It was also a way to try to get funding so we could keep doing working on the game full time. Um, but mostly we've just tried, just word of mouth, Twitter, Facebook, promotions. We just have never had enough cash on hand to do an ad, a real honest to goodness ad campaign, and that's okay. I mean, we've made a lot of friends. We've built a lot of good relationships. Uh, that way because we've been out there so often. We go to trade shows, to our conventions, as well, and try to put the game in front of people there. And it's been a long road. You start out. as a nobody from nowhere, and
Mm.
and especially when you say, "Oh, we've got an endless runner," that's that's like saying I got a new take on a platformer. People kind of shut you down right away, and because but after years and years of working at it and showing the gameplay, it's people are willing to take a look at it now. So.
Hmm. That's cool. So, aside from Kickstarter and your own savings, how did you go about funding the game?
Um, well, that was pretty much it. We had savings, and the Kickstarter money came in and kept us going for a while. And once we finally released the game on Steam, we had a bit of money coming in from Steam as well. And then from there, we just the games ended up sustaining us as we kind of participated in sales and pushed it onto brought it to new platforms. We've been able to kind of continually sustain ourselves. But just that, I mean, we've not been a crazy hit anywhere. We've not been like your mega hits. But the game has performed well enough to support us making new games, and that's all we're really looking for. So.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. That's cool. So, how did you go about QAing the game and getting feedback for it?
So that was kind of actually a big I guess I'd call it a failure. We did QA with ourselves, our friends, our family, and we did some beta tests, but the beta tests we didn't have a lot of hands-on with the people who were playing it, and so the game didn't get as deep of a QA pass as we would have hoped. We tried to dig deeply into it. So ultimately, what happened was that we did a lot of. I think it worked out well for the game's design because we were pretty, yeah, I guess, pretty tuned into the game's design and how we wanted it to play. But I don't think we caught a lot of the little things until the game was already out and we had lots of people playing it, and then people are getting back to us, and we kind of had big realizations. Oh yeah, we kind of missed this bug or this issue here, and so the game did. We released a lot of updates. The game's gotten refined a lot since it was released.
Oh yeah, because you got thousands of people playing the game, and
Hmm.
that's just like manpower and man hours that you just don't have on a two-man team.
Exactly. Our next projects, we're gonna try to do more QA. We're gonna
Mm.
try to do more intentional testing and probably bring in groups of people and try to do hands-on testing and that. So.
Oh, that's a cool concept. Freelance QAs. No doubt it already exists, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Interesting
we need.
idea.
Yeah, we need the indie community needs that actually. There's not a good go-to source for indies to have a QA. So if anybody is wanting to like start a QA company that's reasonable, I think you'd probably find a lot of indies would say, hey, I'll jump on that. My game needs that. So uh, you got
Well,
any?
that's a cool idea. I've not thought of that literally until now you mentioned that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of individuals that kind of have a background in QA, but when you're doing it, you really want more than one person, and
Mm.
you really want, some formality to it
Oh,
to make sure you're getting
oh,
good stats. So,
yeah. QA is deep, and yeah, you need a team of people. It's not so much one person, but
hmm.
generally it's quite easy. Once you're doing it for like a week or two, or in my case, 2 or so months, then it's not
Yeah,
that bad.
yeah.
Yeah, it's his own challenge. So speaking of challenge, what was cut from the game and why?
Hmm. Well, our biggest one was this idea we had for a co-op relay multiplayer. It was an async co-op thing where you would run a leg of a course essentially, and as far as you got, you'd sort of like set a check mark there, and then another person could join your team. Anyone, you could put a Twitter link out there, and someone could join your team, and they would run the next leg and go as far as they could. And it would go on and until five players had run the course. And I was a Kickstarter promise, and we actually put it out there in our original PC release. It was in there, and we just found out again after the fact, after the game was out there, that it just wasn't very fun, because when people were jumping in, yeah, there was a sense of kind of like you didn't want to let down the team, so people were afraid to jump in. And when you jump in, we realized that the game is so fast, you had no time to warm up. In the normal game, you kind of have this opportunity to sort of warm up and get adjusted to the speed. And we were throwing people in at Region 5, and it was just chaos, and they would just crash right away.
Hmm.
So it just people, it fizzled out. People would try it one or two times, and then they wouldn't do it anymore. So that was a big thing. We just pulled it out from that point. We said, why try to spend months building a multiplayer backend for this game and try to bring that to new platforms when nobody's having fun with this. So that was a
Right.
big one. That was a big cut.
Oh, cool. So yeah, a lot. That sounds quite big multiplayer.
Hmm.
So, what was the biggest thing you learned while working on the game?
Oh wow, so many lessons. Um, so many lessons. You know, I'm not sure if I'd say this is the biggest. I'm not sure, but it might be. This might be the biggest. I would say one of the things we learned is that just because something isn't a commercial success initially, or you don't see the results that you're looking for or hope for, it doesn't mean that it's not a good product or a good game or good experience for people. And we learned to just that to build that once you're confident that what you have is worthwhile, that people enjoy it, um, and that it's a worthwhile experience. It's worth the money people are paying for it. You got to push. You got to just keep trying things because it's a big industry. There's a lot of roadblocks and a lot of things are just going to go wrong. And we learned to you just got to keep trying things and keep pushing. And we gave a talk a while back at GDC and gave the analogy of throwing darts. And how it seems so random at first. Like why did this work and this didn't work? Why did we get this press coverage and then over here they didn't care about this at all? And it seems so random at first, but the longer you do it, the more you kind of refine the skill, and the more bullseyes you tend to get. So
Love that persistence. Love it.
yep, yep.
So, on the opposite to that, what was the worst thing that happened, and how did you overcome it?
Oh, well, we ran out of money several times. So we were going on savings and, having jumped in with both feet, going full time, not something I would recommend. We were probably a little overconfident. Uh, we, uh, we both have families. We both have bills to pay. And so running out of money in that situation was scary. It was stressful. Um, the Kickstarter was a bit of a desperation move, which you should never do a Kickstarter in desperation. So that was incredibly stressful. It was energizing, but it was incredibly stressful, especially on our families. And so that was probably the hardest thing was, going nearly broke and wondering if we were going to pay the bills. So,
Mm. Oh, wow, that's quite big. That is quite big. So, well, speaking of going broke, almost, what was the best game dev purchase you made?
oh,
Whether there's a few choices at least. Whether it
okay.
was a software license, top quality piece of hardware or equipment, or simply a comfortable chair, good desk, and a second monitor.
I think our best decision economically has been Unity. We actually, when we started this, we were building apps in a smaller, lesser known engine. And we realized after we'd released that although it was a cross-platform engine, it didn't have the scale to be able to do as frequent of updates. And once we moved things over to Unity, we not only found that porting game to a new platform became easier. We also found that there's this massive community of people who are out there building on the same engine, and that's almost invaluable to developer because now you can jump on forums and say, "Hey, I'm having this weird issue," and even if it is a core issue with the software or a bug, that needs to be fixed, there's so many people working at it that they found workarounds. They found ways to get it going. So you rarely hit that point where we're like, oh, we just shut down. We can't move forward until we get an update for this. So I think Unity is right up there with the top purchases. Well worth the money we've spent on it. So
Yeah, one of the previous interviews was using, I think, Unity or a similar engine, and they were making the game. I think it was episode 17 actually,
hmm,
making the game for PC and iPhone, and the game was exactly the same for both consoles, PC and iPhone. And they mentioned that they had problems with the player base on each one, talking
hmm,
about how it was too dissimilar to one or the other,
hmm,
and that the developer realized that they weren't using the console and its mechanics or tools or functions to the best of its ability, and they
hmm.
weren't making the game for the console; they were just porting it.
Yep.
Have you felt that as well? Like you've not fully taken advantage of each one, in this case iOS?
Yeah. So for us, we actually from the outset, we actually designed the control system, and we're 2 months into development. We started designing the control system and tuning it for all of the controls that we wanted to work. So we used controllers with analog sticks. We used the keyboard, and we tested on touchscreen, and
Mm.
we tuned all of those. So we wanted it to feel great on all of those. It was a very early, probably one of the great decisions, as far as for all the mistakes we made. That was a good one. And yeah, the goal was to make it feel just as good on an analog stick as it was on a D-pad or on a keyboard. And we experimented with many other things too. We tried accelerometer control, we tried mouse control. We basically tried anything out there that seemed like it might have potential, and we stuck with basically the most straightforward control system that felt good everywhere. That's what we ended up with. So that
Simplicity,
yep.
simplicity, beautiful.
And that was a huge asset when we brought the game over to consoles, because then it didn't feel like you were missing something by not having a keyboard in front of you or something like that. So,
Hmm. Hmm. So, what game development related book, lecture, or learning resource can you recommend?
oh dear. To be completely honest, we've been working too hard and we haven't read enough. I would recommend, one of the things that I'd recommend is following people who have walked the road ahead of you and have good game dev advice. And so we have found that blog posts from experienced developers, talks from experienced developers, are, are probably our biggest asset.
Hmm.
So Daniel Cook is the guy who they recently released Alpha Bear, made Triple Town, and many other games. Probably one of the deepest thinkers in game design, in my opinion. Um, if you read stuff from him, you can't really go wrong. Watch his talks in the GDC vault. Rami Ishmael obviously had good success, but he's also got he's a very level-headed approach to game development, and just one of those guys. You read his blog posts, you watch his talks, you'll just learn a ton. So to be honest, uh, within the indie community, doing talks, writing blog posts, is kind of it's a bit of promotion. It's one way you can get the word out about your studio. So a lot of people start doing it very early in the process, and they don't really have that experience. So just because you read a development log or a story on a well-known website, it sounds really legitimate. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be worthwhile. So I definitely recommend like following those people who have that proven track record, and also don't talk in big kind of glowing terms about follow these steps. There are no step programs that are going to work for you in indie development. You can't just follow these, in someone else's. What worked for one person is probably not going to work for you. Every game kind of has its own story, its own audience, and its own approach. And I think I think following those kind of level-headed folks, who have seen failure, seen success, probably the best way to go. So.
Yeah, there's no one way to build a business, and nothing stopping you from learning from the mistakes of others.
Yep. Oftentimes, you'll learn much more from watching a failure than you will from just looking at success stories. We made that mistake early on. We we'd read the blog posts and read the success stories, you know,
Oh
say,
yeah.
oh, we can do this, you know, we can follow in these footsteps, and almost none of that stuff pans out, you know. So
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've recently had a failure of my own, but yeah, we learn and
hmm
you take it from there.
yep,
You take it from there. Better late than never.
absolutely.
So, like an Evernote or Trello, do you have a useful or productivity enhancing software, app, extension, or website worth sharing?
Yeah, yeah. Trello is awesome. It's worth figuring out how to integrate it into your workflow. You know, it's a little bit different. The paradigm is a little different than kind of maybe what you're used to. But Trello is great. We also use Google Docs a lot because we work remotely. So you know, I think you can never kind of underestimate the power of two people working in the same space. You know, so if you have a spreadsheet that has, you know, like all of our achievements, for instance, you know, they're in the spreadsheet, and anyone at any time can go in there and look at the, you know, look at the Google Sheets and say, oh, you know, this achievement's supposed to unlock here, you know, and that. So you know, even just that simple thing. And then we recently moved over to Slack for all of our communication stuff. Really love it. It seems like a simple thing at first to say, wasn't it just a chat client? And it really is. You know, it's just a really well thought out chat client, that it works very well. You know, we're now kind of coordinating several things at once, and keeps us all in touch with each other. We know what's going on really well. So
That's really cool. A few people have mentioned Slack and Google Docs. Simple,
hmm
gets to the point. So
exactly.
Forest San Filippo,
hmm
Forest San Filippo. What advice, Forest, can you give to aspiring game developers, small indie studios, and people trying to get to where you are today?
Sure, sure. Um, well, if you're trying to make a game, if you're trying to break into game development, the first piece of advice I would give is finish something. Finish something. You know, right down to the, if you got a project you're working on, you know, get it right down to the UI and the end credits. You know, have everything done, have a polished, finished package. If the game you're working on is going to take 2 years before you finish it, maybe set that one aside and take on a smaller project so that you can finish something. And that finished product is going to be valuable to you in many ways that are not immediately obvious. There's a confidence building aspect. There is all of the lessons that you learn in finishing something. You know, getting something 80% there, you know, you miss out on a lot of those lessons and what it, you know, what it means to, you know, to really put that final polish on there. And so often there are bugs that sit there, and you don't learn about, you know, you don't learn the mistakes you're making on the coding side. There are UI issues because if you don't have a finished game you can put in front of a player, and you know they're getting lost or confused in your UI. I mean, we've reworked our UI probably 6 times, because I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I designed websites. You know, the websites are one page at a time. You know,
Hmm.
um, and so that's the first and foremost one is finish something. You know, get it done, and you know, then I think the second one is probably do it again. You know, don't give up. Just keep going. So
Do it again.
mhm,
Cool, beautiful, love it. I agree. You make a game, you learn how it's done, and then do it again. Simple as that. Rinse and
mhm.
repeat. So, Forrest, what is next for you, and what's the best way to contact you?
Sure. So next for us, we've announced we're coming to the Race of Sun's coming to the Wii U. Um, Hopefully before the end of summer here. We're working through certification, which is, you know, always interesting. There's all kinds of little things. If you talk about QA, you know, that's where a QA team would come in handy.
Compliance. Yeah,
Yeah.
compliance.
You know, all those little things. So we're working through that right now, but the game is in essence done, and we're gonna come to the Wii U soon. Um, and we're probably gonna bring it to some other platforms later in the year or early next year. But those projects we probably won't be working on ourselves. We're gonna try to again hire contractors to help with that. And
Mhm.
us as a company, we're working on we've been working on prototypes. We've got a friend, a fellow indie developer who's been helping us produce prototypes all summer long. So we've got tons of new ideas flowing, lots of fun little games coming to the fore. And we're also we've also got a game we've announced that is going to go into full on production very shortly here. It's called Hexarden, and it's a kind of a contemplative puzzle based hexagon grid game, and it's all built around the idea of growing a garden. So
Mhm.
very different
Cool.
from anything we've made in the past, and we're really excited about it. Really excited to kind of finish it. So
That sounds like a new kind of concept, a garden simulator of sorts. Sounds a lot more engaging than a grass simulator.
yeah, yeah. Hopefully what we produce is more than a grass simulator in the end. So
Oh yes. So, Forrest, it appears that we're out of time for this episode of the Daily Dev Talk. It was great talking to you and knowing where you get knowing that you get contractors in to finish the games
mhm.
and well, a load of other things. You don't rely on a Kickstarter straight away if you're desperate. Unity is amazing. It's worthwhile integrating Trello into your system. A lot of cool, really cool things, and also how to get your game really on free for Steam. Well, on free for Steam. So a little insider information, communication obviously helped there.
Mhm, mhm.
Well, it was great talking to you, Forrest.
You as well. Really appreciate you having me on.
Stay tuned, Overload Nation. More episodes to come. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Daily Dev Talk with me, Adrian Nantchev. If you are a game developer that wants to get your name and game out there and to share your experiences and stories, or you have feedback or opinions of the show, then contact me at info@gameoverload.co.uk. That's info@gameoverload.co.uk. Stay tuned for tomorrow's episode, more to come.